Okay, so this video series is quite some time overdue. Back on my old channel, a follower of mine, a subscriber by the name of Ben Haywood Music, Benjamin Haywood I think his name is, he asked me if I could talk about my experience living and working abroad in Canada on a work permit. I mentioned this, I think I briefly touched upon this in some of my earlier videos, where I worked for about 9 or 10 months, I think it was, between July of 2019, was it July or was it August? I think it was, well, actually no, it might have been June. Oh, it was so long ago, I'd have to dig through my old files and check. So yes, it would have been June or July 2019, and it ended on March 3rd, I think, 2020, during the lockdown. This was when the lockdown restrictions were being put in place. So let me start from the beginning. Why did I make the decision to go to Canada in the first place? Why Canada specifically? And what was I hoping to get out of this? Well, I'd always wanted to live and work abroad in a foreign country ever since I first learned that it was possible to do that. It was something that I've always dreamed of doing. Because growing up, I always had a huge imagination. I had all these daydreams and fantasies about exploring other cultures. I had a deep sense of wanderlust. But my family was one of modest means. We did visit other countries sometimes on holidays. We went to France a couple of times when I was very young, and on a few occasions we went to the United States. One time was so that we could visit a marriage that was happening in our extended family, so we could attend the wedding, and we were sticking around there for a few weeks. That was great fun. And at one point, when we'd sold one of the houses that we were living in, we were living relatively comfortably compared to before, so we decided to go on another trip to the United States, this time to Florida. The last time we went to California. But that was all very brief, and that was part of a family. This time, my express intention, or what I was hoping to achieve, was, well, I just wanted to live and sort of do my own thing in a foreign country without the aid and support of my parents. It was something that I hadn't really done before. Living by my own means, being responsible for my own finances, trying to pull up stakes and assert my own independence. I didn't have a strong plan or a plan of action like that, but I had an idea that it would all just fall into place and work out on its own. And for anyone who's wondering or debating whether or not they should do it, and they're nervous or afraid of what could go wrong, I say you have nothing to lose by giving it a try, because as young men especially, I think women have this too, but this is especially true of men, we've all got an appetite for adventure and challenge. And it can be stifling, it can be demoralizing, just living with your parents. It doesn't really help you to grow as a person. When you're living in the same environment where you can predict with reasonable certainty what your 3 meals a day are going to be, and most of the time you don't have to do any cooking. I never even learned how to use the washing machine until I was in my late 20s. There were all these things, my parents, I feel like they gave me a very sheltered middle-class upbringing. My dad, in his own misguided way, there were lots of practical skills that he could have taught me. There were lots of life challenges he could have prepared me for, but he never did. And the same with my mum. I never even got my driver's license until I was 29, just a year ago. But even though I didn't feel like a real adult, I wanted a chance to prove that I was. You know, I wanted to challenge myself. I wanted to subject myself to the whims of fate and see how it would all turn out. Now, I went to another English-speaking country. You know, if I really wanted a challenge, I could have gone somewhere where I didn't speak the language, and that would have been even more complicated. Although I would say, because of the interconnectivity of the world and the internet, and even the rise in translation apps, I'd say a lot of the challenges and the distances between different countries are beginning to fade away with time. But still, being in a foreign country all by yourself, without anybody but yourself to rely on, I'd say that it's good for you and it can help you grow. And even though my experience in Canada didn't quite turn out the way I wanted it to, I still feel like a better person for having tried it. So anyway, let's go back to the beginning. So I'd always wanted to do this. The first opportunity I had, the first time I learned it was actually possible to live and work abroad in a foreign country, it was back when I was in my second year, or was it my first? No, it was my first year of studying at the University of Reading. There was an opportunity for me to take part in a study abroad semester where I'd spend a whole semester, so 6 months, studying at the University of Ottawa, because they were offering a partnership foreign exchange student program with my university. And it was something that I really had my heart set on. But unfortunately, I backed out at the last minute, mainly on the recommendation of my parents, because I was falling behind in my studies. And even though I could have made the decision to go, if my parents tell me not to do something, if my parents told me not to do something, then I wouldn't be able to rest easy on my conscience by going against their word. That's just the kind of person I was. I just didn't have a big ego growing up. I can't really challenge the advice or the recommendations of my parents, because deep down I always felt that they knew what was best for me. So I had to kiss that opportunity goodbye. But the next year, this is interesting because I didn't talk about this actually, I took part in a J2 visa program for me to work a few months in the United States. And I found out about this purely by chance at the Freshers' Fair that was happening in my second year. I took part in that, and that was fun. That was certainly fun, but it was short-lived. I had to fly back because, again, I wasn't doing too well in my studies. This is something of a common theme with me, there's so many things I regret about my university life. But anyway, even though I got to experience living in the woods in the United States, in Washington State, incidentally, pretty much in a town and location strikingly similar to the one in Twin Peaks, in that TV drama series that I was talking about in a previous video. But anyway, all this having been done, my wanderlust, my appetite for adventure hadn't been satiated yet. I wanted to live and establish myself in a foreign country. I wanted to take over the world. I even had, it's weird for me to admit this now, but I had this fantasy. I had this recurring daydream, this fancy that one day I would meet an attractive, beautiful young woman. She would either be from Canada or she'd be from America, and we would fall in love, we would get married, and we would have binational children. It didn't quite work out like that, but anyway, even though it turned out differently to how I anticipated, I still wanted to give it a go. I had strong emotional, I had passionate reasons. I was deeply passionate about this. So anyway, fast forward to 2018 when I finally finished my university degree. Absolutely hated it. what practical skills, what practical things do I feel in retrospect that I've picked up from my university degree? Not much. I think I learned how to use the citations and referencing system. I learned, if anything, going to university had the opposite effect that it's supposed to have. The idea of going to university is that it's supposed to sharpen your mental and cognitive faculties and endow you with an increased appetite for learning. But for me, it did the opposite. It made me less interested in reading. It made me so demoralized. I felt like I could never pick up a book ever again after going to university. And even when I got my degree, I didn't want to go anywhere with it because it sucked all the life and all the aspirations, all the dreams I had of getting a good job before I started. All that was gone. But one thing that remained at the end of it was my dream to go to a foreign country. And I had my eyes set on Canada specifically because, as it happened, there's a company that I remember learning about called Gap 360. They were actually handing out information leaflets even so far back as the early 2010s, back when I was in secondary and at school and sixth form. So they had piqued my curiosity for some time, and they offered a wide range of volunteering programs in many different parts of the world, such as Peru, Ecuador, Costa Rica, and even things like religious retreats. And I think there was one in, was it Burma or Thailand? I forget where exactly. There was even one where they offered a hike across the Inca Trail at Machu Picchu. But a lot of these, I must add, were phenomenally expensive. We're talking 4 figures at the very least. But the ones that I had my sights set on there were 2. One was live and work abroad in Canada, and then there was one live and work abroad in Australia. I'm not quite sure what the reasons for this are, but it is very easy, I believe, given the historical cultural links between Britain and the Commonwealth nations, such as Canada and Australia, the fact that we all speak the same language, we're basically the same ethnic and racial stock, and we're only separated by 200 or 300 years worth of cultural isolation. It's very easy to arrange guest worker visas, I think, between these 3 governments. Even now, I still think it is. It's more complicated and difficult for the United States, though. The only work program that I could see regarding the United States that Gap 360 had was to do with being an au pair. And I know little about that, but I think for the most part, they're looking for women for that job. I did manage to have a little stint abroad in the United States, however, but anyway, I'd already been there and done that as far as I was concerned, but I wanted to try something different. So I picked Canada because, first of all, it was geographically and culturally approximate to, it was situated very close by to the United States. It was a place I'd never been before. It was a very large, huge country. I think it's the country with the second largest geographic landmass, second only to Russia. I think it has something like 5 or 6 different time zones. I might need to double check that. And there's so many, I've seen so many beautiful pictures of all these nature trails, lots of interesting animals I thought I'd see roaming around in the wild. This was long before I learned how to drive, by the way, and I would later learn that if you want to visit a large country, if you don't know how to drive, then you're only going to be able to explore the metropolitan areas. And you'll probably need a lot of money to get around by plane or by Greyhound bus. But anyway, that's another thing I would say. I don't recommend that you visit a country as large as Canada if you don't know how to drive first. Because that's a thing that I would say. But anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. So with with the fire of hope and optimism in my heart, I had resolved that I was going to do the following. In the summer of 2018, I decided I was going to spend the next year working, accruing up savings so that I could finally do what I had dreamed of doing. I would hop on a plane, get off at Toronto, stay there for however long I felt I needed to, maybe find a job there. It's amusing thinking that I would find a job so easily in a place so densely populated as a capital city like Toronto, but that was my plan. And I would just sort of let my own, I'd let the whims of fate guide me. I'd let my own intuition tell me where to go next. There's something quite liberating about doing something like that on your own initiative. You know, I've always found in my life, I never really plan ahead for a lot of things because planning is stressful. Planning involves making contingencies for the future. And as I've already explained many times before, I suck at predicting the future. There's so many things that can go wrong, it's a waste of time to even think of one such scenario. The way I see it, every time you walk outside your house, there's a theoretical chance that you could be killed by a madman walking down the street or run over by a bus. Do you plan, therefore, each time that you walk outside your house, do you plan accordingly? Well, of course not, because you need to leave the house. Most people will need to leave the house for practical reasons, like doing shopping, collecting the groceries, visiting people, having a drink at the local pub, or just going on a walk, etc., etc. It is a contingency that you could plan ahead for, but that doesn't mean you need to do it. And if you do, all it does is it fills your head with unnecessary preoccupations of worry and fear. And for that very reason, I've just never been that good at planning, and I've never really been interested in it. Because whenever I imagine worries, whenever I imagine a future challenge, the anxiety that appears in my head almost certainly appears to be far greater than the reality of the challenge. In other words, I don't like to conceptualize how dangerous or how challenging something is until I've experienced or witnessed it firsthand. Until I know what there is to expect. I prefer to go in there blind. That being said though, obviously there were things I did prepare for. I brought a brand new suitcase. I packed way too many clothes, honestly. I probably should have packed a bit lighter with things like clothes. I had at least £3,000 worth of savings on me. And this was a thing that they warned you about. They told you that if you're to get processed through visa, through customs and immigration, there's the possibility that you might need to prove that you have enough savings so that you can live and work in the foreign country. Although in practice, honestly, the whole admission with the biometrics and the passports, it was a lot more straightforward than I anticipated. Oh yeah, that's a thing. I did have to get my fingertips taken and analyzed. This is what they call biometrics. I needed to get a passport. I needed to get my visa approved. So it did mean a couple of trips to London, which was also pretty exciting. It's not often that I visit London. Usually when I go to London, it's either to attend a social event or it's for some other. It's never for a dull reason that I go down to London, because I don't have a job that requires me to be there. Looking back, I'd say those are some of the most interesting times. It was before I'd set foot in Canada, so I had the hope and the optimism that I was preparing for something that would be good, that would be thrilling, that would take me away from this bubble of being stuck at home with my parents and my family. I would set foot into the world of adventure. All right. Anyway, all that pretty much was preamble. Oh, also, but yeah, I spent the next year working. First, I started working at McDonald's. Yeah, this wasn't actually the first time I started working for McDonald's, by the way, was a year ago, a year before, back in 2015, back when I was doing my course. But I started working for a different McDonald's because, first of all, I'd worked there before, and second, the work there was pretty light. It wasn't anything challenging or significant. I wouldn't go back to work at McDonald's because obviously I feel like I've been there and seen that and done that, etc. But it gave me the funds I needed, for the most part, to start over there. And then in February of 2019, I stopped working for McDonald's, and I had this urge to try something else. I can't remember exactly why I stopped working at McDonald's. Was it because I felt that I'd accrued enough savings, or was it because I'd gotten bored and tired of McDonald's? I don't remember exactly what my reason was, but there was another place that I started work for. It was a place called the Talbot Inn. It was a bar and restaurant and a lodge and an inn, you know, basically an hotel for guests. And that would be the first time that I would start working for them. And that was the first time I had the experience of working as a bartender and not a food busser, a sommelier, I think. Yeah, sommelier. I don't really have a lot of positive memories working there. The first time round, though, because actually I worked there twice. Once was before I went to Canada. The second time was after I came back from Canada. I'll explain why that was, probably in a different video. But knowing what I now know about that place and taking into account the things that happened there, I can't really look back at my time there and smile. Anyway, that was all the preamble. So I officially left for Canada. I really should have written this down, man. Once I'd stopped working for the Talbot Inn, that was when I'd finally hopped on the plane and I took off at Toronto Pearson Airport. I'm gonna extend this into a multi-video series and talk about my entire experience in the next few parts. But this has basically been part one. I gotta carry on with my collection now, but there's more to come. So I hope you guys will stick around for the next videos in this series. Anyway, take care everyone. Cheerio.